Welcome to the Summit for Wellness podcast, where we help you climb to the peak of your health. And now, here is your host, Brian Carroll.
It's weird to be saying this, as this year has been a heck of a roller coaster, but we are now officially entering the holiday season, which means in previous years, people's health goals get shoved under the table. You know, the table that is full of cookies, pies, and other holiday treats. And while I'm not really sure what this holiday season will look like, history shows us that there is one thing on everyone's minds once January comes around: weight loss. Weight loss is one of the hardest things to do, especially with temptations around every corner, but this episode will help you with that. What's up, everyone? I'm Brian Carroll, and I'm here to help people move more, eat well, and be adventurous. And today I have Dr. Lydia C. Alexander of the Obesity Medicine Association joining me to talk about strategies to help reduce weight. Before we get started, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a quick rating and review on your podcast player. Those reviews help to keep the show going and gets it in front of more people. And we'll be talking about the pillars for successful weight loss today, so let's jump into the conversation. Dr. Lydia C. Alexander practices obesity medicine as part of the Kaiser Permanente Medical Weight Management Group in San Francisco, California. She is passionate about the practice of obesity medicine and committed to educating primary care providers about the benefits of taking a weight-centric approach when addressing chronic diseases. Thank you for coming onto the show, Lydia.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Of course, and I'm excited to chat with you more about obesity. But before we get started with that, let's learn a little bit more about you, because I know there's a lot that you're involved in down there in San Francisco. So give us kind of a brief overview of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am I'm board certified, first of all, in internal medicine. So I'm a physician who specializes in that. That's adults. And I trained at UC Davis School of Medicine here nearby. And now I am part of a subspecialty that's growing by leaps and bounds called obesity medicine. And I was board certified in that in 2015. It's a new field that I believe began certifying physicians in 2012, and this year hit a record high in terms of people who sat for the exam. It was over 1,000 physicians, and we now have, I think the last number was 4,152 physicians certified in this. So it's the numbers are growing and will probably exceed the total number of endocrinologists in our entire country by next year is my guess.
Which is pretty interesting, because that's also an indication that obesity is becoming more and more of a problem. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. It's I think of it as probably the what is the word I'm looking for? Kind of like the basis for many of the different chronic diseases that we routinely treat in internal medicine.
And what's the technicalities around obesity? What defines it?
So what defines obesity from in a very, I guess, in a very simplistic approach is having a body mass index, a BMI, which is kilograms per meter squared, for those who would like to know, that is above 30. And then we classify that into three different categories. So there's class 1, which is that very beginning point, then class 2 and class 3. And above a BMI over 40 is now considered severe obesity or class 3 obesity. And within all of that, BMI doesn't really tell the full picture, because I do mention from time to time that Arnold Schwarzenegger had a BMI of 37 in his heyday when he was Mr. Universe. And so no one certainly would have told him or said that he was unhealthy necessarily and had obesity. So also, body composition is very important, and other indicators of health around the BMI. So it's really sort of the beginning point, but a really great metric to use unless you're, I guess, 2 standard deviations out of your comfort curve area. Certainly, based on BMI, about a third or a little more, almost 40% of our country has obesity by those numbers. And if you include overweight, which is a BMI over 25, three quarters, about 70% of the United States suffers from overweight or obesity. So it is, it's more than a burgeoning field. I'm glad there are more specialists like me who are coming online because we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of people. So you're saying about 75% of the population in the States is overweight or obese.
Based on the BMI numbers that I've just given you, and in fact, not to sound dire, but those are based on Caucasian populations or European body types. Japanese BMI numbers, as well as those from China and subcontinental India, are actually lower. So if we were to consider, especially in my part of the United States, here in California and the Bay Area, where we have a larger Asian population, BMIs for them, overweight is considered starting at a BMI of 23. So that number kind of only gets bigger. And I think the last statistics I saw from CDC projections is that by 2030, that 50% of the country would have obesity by then.
What's kind of the jump? Let's kind of break it down in a way that people can get more of a visual idea of what these BMI numbers would look like. So if you have like a 150-pound person that's, I don't know, 5'5", where would that be on that type of scale?
So off the top of my head, that would probably fall in the overweight category. So if we look at men and women, there's slightly different calculations you can do. It's usually easiest for me, unless I take out my BMI calculator, which quite honestly I often do because that's the line of work I'm in. But if you think of, so I'm 5'5". And so that's a good number to start with. And so for every 1 inch, if you add 5 pounds, then my ideal body weight should be 125 by that measure. And so my body weight still falls in the normal range until I have a BMI at 25, and so I could still go up to about 150, 160, and still be in the normal range, or right at the very beginning of overweight, and so that and if I were to have obesity as a 5'5" woman, I would probably need to weigh around 170 or so.
Okay.
So that gives some indication of kind of the ranges we're talking about. And BMI, think about between every 7 to 10 pounds probably puts you in additional, 1 kilogram per meter squared, depending on male, female, and where you are in those categories.
And does age get factored into this at all as well?
No, so that's super interesting too, because age doesn't play any part in BMI and where you should be in BMI. But we do know that as we get older, our body composition changes. And so, the body composition I had when, I was 20 in college and an athlete is very, very different than the BMI range I have now, a couple decades later. So even if I'm the same weight, whether I'm in the healthy weight or the overweight or obesity, that number, the number on the scale and the body mass index don't tell the entire picture. And again, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger is, one of those great examples to show that, your skeletal muscle mass and your body fat percent can really change. And that first number is kind of like a just kind of quick and dirty indicator of kind of where you fall on that scale. And so this can be particularly important in older adults, say over the age of 60 or 65, who maybe at a, let's say a BMI of 26, and you think, well, they're overweight, but it's okay. not so bad, could be, could be better, could be worse. But if you were to do a body composition analysis, and the most common one that we use in in obesity medicine as obesity specialists in our office are the BIA, the body impedance tracking. And you probably have seen those where you stand on it. Some people have the home scale that'll do kind of a rudimentary prediction of what your percent body fat is and all that. I've got a fancy one, even tells me my heart rate through my feet, but which is kind of interesting. But anyway, you hold on to these handles, and it runs some electric current through you, and then we'll tell you what is your intracellular and extracellular water weight, your percent body fat, your skeletal muscle mass, and so the concern with older adults, especially if they're sedentary, which is very easy to do these days in our society, it's not uncommon to see someone who has maybe 50 or 53% body fat, so half of them literally as body fat, and so they're actually sort of sicker than you would, in a sense, sicker than you would predict based on BMI only.
Wow. Are you using the InBody machine? Is that the one that you use?
Yeah, we actually do use the InBody machine. Yeah, there are 3 or 4 on the market out there. We've got that one. I think the gold standard is DEXA, which is the same type of machine that's used, for checking bone mass. And so those tend to be, pretty amazing, but they're also fairly expensive and more for the purposes of research at this point.
Right. So, I mean, with 75% of the population that are, overweight or obese, obviously the big question is, why is this happening? Right. So this probably also leads directly into a lot of the treatment options that you have. But what have you found to be some of these leading causes for this increase in obesity?
Well, I think that when we thinking about obesity, it's really it's almost I call them obesities. So there are so many different paths that you can follow to develop an unhealthy weight, body mass index, body composition, and if we look at society 100 years ago, and we look at places in the world where people tend to be healthier than we would predict given the quality of the healthcare there. And I'm thinking about blue zones, for instance. There's Sardinia, there's Ikaria in Greece, and Okinawa in Japan, and a few other places like that. What we see is that what's changed dramatically on a population level is there's the level of activity that we have, and then the quality of the food that we eat, and sleep, for instance. Our circadian rhythms have been thrown off. So that's also another important area. I would say that likely stress levels have chronic stress levels as opposed to acute stress have changed. There are a number of factors, I think, if we were able to follow it over the last 100 or 150 years, between electricity, quality of the food, and again, just physical movement, that have dramatically changed for societies as a whole, and for those of us who are more genetically predisposed to have that. And there are some people who do have more of a propensity to gain weight, and that was likely a very good thing to have 10,000 years ago, that you could retain weight even through some type of famine or a few days or weeks without a constant food source. It's not as helpful any longer because food is no longer scarce.
Let's go through all those different options that you talked about and kind of break them down a little bit more. So if someone's coming to you and they're obese, they probably are uncomfortable with movement in some form, right? They might have some aches and pains. It just might not, they might be out of breath really easy. They might not be comfortable with it. So what are some different ways to help them to increase their movement?
Okay, so I love the topic of physical activity because because I love physical activity, but also because I like to break it down into 5 different categories. And so the first category that everybody knows about a lot is cardio. And I think if I were to skew and think about who likes to do cardio more, it's probably more of the female population who's really into cardio. And then the second one is strength training, and strength training also super important. And these two are the the forms of physical activity that we're most accustomed to when we think about what we should be doing. Using the word exercise. Beyond that, there's also balance. And there's flexibility training. And lastly, and my favorite one is called NEAT. And that's an acronym that stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I mostly shorten the thermogenesis and just call it time. And so NEAT is probably where I would start to some extent with a patient of mine who may be more sedentary and is having, does not have a history of having been physically active for some period of time. And what that means is just getting extra movement throughout the day. So generally speaking, it's, if you have some aches and pains and those sorts of things, if you're carrying, more weight than may be comfortable, we want to be careful about, joints and, ligaments and tendons and not cause, any type of, physical stress or damage with suddenly changing our behavior overnight. But we can focus on needs. We can also focus on balance and flexibility to increase stability, increase movement in a helpful way. And so those are 3 areas that I focus on, depending on, the level of ability. There are a lot of incredible chair exercises that you can do that, even just, sitting, standing outside off a chair and getting back in the chair and doing that a certain number of times throughout the day within a work day can be really helpful to strengthen some of the muscles. In terms of balance and flexibility, and it also engages a lot of our muscles, is standing on one foot and trying to see how long you can stand there. And you can make a game out of it to see, can I make it 5 seconds, 10 seconds? How many seconds can I do? Probably want to have some type of stable, like a wall or a door or something that's not going to move too much, to help you get started with that. And then you can start to try to let go and see how long you can last. But that can really help our proprioception and engages the muscles. And it's a great way to start with patients who have an extremely low level of physical activity. And the nice thing about NEAT is that if we think about 24 hours in a day, and let's say the ideal person, I know that's not a lot of us, are getting 8 hours of sleep. Now we've got 16 hours in the day to work with here. And, even if I were a very active person, I would probably, if I were, which I'm trying to be again, would go to the gym and work out maybe 60 minutes. And if I got really good at it, maybe I would do 90 minutes, and I would try to incorporate strength training, cardio, and some, maybe some flexibility training or whatnot, every day during the week. And so that's just 90 minutes. And now we're left with all these other minutes. And what can we do with that? Maybe you can't have that level of activity for more than an hour and a half. The average person would, probably not be able to sustain that. But NEAT, you can do for a very long period of time. And I think this is the activity, going back to the blue zones across the world, is really the type of activity that is noted to be occurring on a reproducible daily basis, that we're just moving your body and, for hours during the day. And so that can really help with maintaining muscle mass. And it can also help with blood sugar regulation, with blood pressure regulation, with maintaining energy, decreasing stress hormones, because after all, we are animals and we do like to move around, and that feels good, increases endorphins. So there's a lot that NEAT can do for us, even though it just feels like maybe the meh, category, but I think it's a really important category and one that I focus on a lot with my patients.
So would an example of neat be like not parking in the very front of the parking lot, maybe parking further back and walking a little bit further to the grocery store, or taking this set of stairs instead of the elevator?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's all those little movements like those. For instance, if if I'm on the phone with my brother, or my my sister-in-law, my mother, I might just get up and pace up and down, repeatedly up and down the hallway while I'm talking to them on the phone. And I've been able to get easily 5,000 steps from a good conversation, up and down the hallway there. And it, over time, it really makes a difference. For one of my, life hacks, I would say, trying to extend, because I know, there are a lot of, sedentary jobs out there. And as a physician, I do have one of those jobs. I need to be in front of the computer a lot, charting and answering emails. And now in my new position at this medtech startup, I spend a lot of time in front of a computer. So my life hack is to get neat by not only having a stand-up desk, but a treadmill desk. And so we got one of those for our place of work, and kind of all share using that.
Perfect. Yeah, so there's always little tweaks here and there that you can add to your environment to try and make neat happen a little bit more often, just like the walking treadmill. One thing you brought up multiple times is sleep, and how not very many people are getting very adequate sleep. So do you have some really good ways to help people to try and get more sleep and more restful sleep?
Yeah, so I would say one of them would be neat, absolutely. And then in strength training as well, there's a lot of little strength training tricks that you can do. Again, these exercises and suggestions are for people who have been at baseline extremely sedentary for long periods of time and have obesity. But marching in place, doing I call it like marching sit-ups. Can activate many different muscles in our body, including our core. Doing wall push-ups can be really, really helpful. And so when we engage different muscles in our body that way, and we use ourselves physically, it really because it reduces some stress hormones, especially cortisol, and increases endorphins over time. It can really help modulate or improve sleep. I would also say that trying to adhere a little more to kind of like natural circadian rhythms. We know that we do have early birds and later people out there, and there's some extremes there. But for many people, trying to keep a reproducible sleep pattern during the week and the weekends. Many studies will show that outside of these outlier populations, the lark and the night owl, that many people fall kind of, squarely more in the middle. And I think for many of us, we've noticed that feeling now that there's light all the time. We have our computer screens, and so we don't get those same outdoor nature cues about when to start getting ready, to wake up or go to sleep. Many of us, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but maybe around 8 p.m. at night, if you're putting the kids to bed and you kind of feel tired and you're just like, oh, I'm exhausted. I'm going to crawl into with the kids, or I'd like to go to bed myself right now. And then somewhere around maybe an hour and a half after that, you get your second wind and are getting some of your best work done from 10 p.m. until midnight. And if you stretch out, it's 1 a.m. And you might be off to the races there for some of us. And but you still have to wake up for work most likely, or for kids yet again, early in the morning. And so that signal that's happening around 8 p.m. is actually our body's natural rhythm, where it saw the sunset. Not today, not yesterday here because of the fires, but it saw the sun set, and your melatonin is coming up, and so you're getting ready for bedtime. And because we're all turning on the lights, looking at our computer screens and whatnot, we're able to kind of bypass that and start all over again.
So, if you have a sleep deficit during the week, and then you go into the weekend, can you actually play catch up on your sleep over 2 days and then go back into a deficit, or does that not work?
So that's a very interesting question that I debated with my son just last week. So who's 17 and wanted to know, could he catch up on sleep? He heard he couldn't. He was a little disappointed about that. And so so I guess it's kind of a tricky answer because there have been studies out there that show you can't really. So if I'm sleep depriving myself for maybe for weeks at a time, getting 6 hours of sleep. I know that I'm squarely an 8-hour person. I don't, 6 hours is not enough for me. Can I catch up on all that sleep? And the answer is no, you can't really catch up on all that sleep. It's, it's gone. And there might be some, there's some health, ramifications to that. But you on some level can catch up on sleep, over the last few days, so to speak. So you can refresh yourself by, and we all notice that if the timing is right and the house is quiet, that, we will get 9 or 10 hours of sleep and be passed out after a hard week at work or whatnot. So yeah, you will do that to some extent, but not fully.
And now you were talking about some neat activities will help with sleep. If you are doing something that increases heart rate right before bed, is that going to spike you up and keep you awake, or is it going to help you pass out?
For most people, that is going to probably, take a little bit of time for you to, to come back down, to relax, and and to get into a sleep routine. There are some people certainly who can do that. Again, they're always outliers, but for the general population, planning physical activity at least 2 or 3 hours away from bedtime is usually a good idea. And when I specifically am thinking of strength training and certainly cardio. When it comes to NEAT, I think again it's a beautiful thing because you could do it any time, and it's only going to make you feel feel better. To some extent. So, taking a stroll after dinner is not only going to lower your blood sugar and maybe give you some time to reflect, which also feels great, but is probably going to help with sleep as well. So that one would be, I would say, is okay.
And then you also brought up stress as a contributor to weight gain and obesity. First off, how can we regulate stress? And then second, how can we regulate super stressful periods that come out of the blue that we aren't prepared for, like right now?
So I'm going to take the latter first. And I think in some ways, the human condition, again, we're animals, we're mammals, and we have certain survival instincts. And that's what the hormone I mentioned a couple times right now, cortisol, in some ways is all about. So when there's an acute stressor, and for us here, for me here in Northern California, it's in addition to coronavirus, it is now the California wildfires and the air quality and the stress around that, not knowing when it's going to go away, and trying to to stay indoors and stay healthy. So these types of acute stressors, and maybe a sudden something catches on fire. I hate to use that one because I just talked about wildfires, but there's some acute stressor, or you need to your child falls down and you're acutely stressed out and you run over there to make sure they're okay. And so that fight or flight mechanism has been engineered into humans for a very, very, very long time. And that type of stress is actually very, very manageable. And they've done studies in babies in utero that have shown that this is actually a very healthy thing to have a little bit of that stress come up, come down, come up, come down through time. It's really the chronic stress that we're experiencing now 5 or 6 months into coronavirus. These fires have been going on for three weeks and probably are going to go on longer. I know Australia had the huge fires in January that went on for many, many weeks. These sort of chronic stressors like that are very, very different because now we're percolating in our cortisol over long periods of time, and we're really not designed to do that. And so that type of stress is a stress that we that we're trying to avoid. The acute stressors and these peaks are not what does it for us, but it's the long-term effects of elevated cortisol levels, and those are really the most detrimental. And we do spend a lot of time talking with our patients around what are some ways that you can you can moderate that throughout your day. There are a whole bunch of apps now on our iPhones, and that's kind of good and kind of bad, because now you're back on your iPhone or your whatever is your PDA device. It's like a mini computer that can help breathe, and fizz is great for sleep, and a few other ones. But those those can be very, very helpful. Different habits such as journaling can be great. And again, I think, physical activity can also play a part.
And then you also talked about food. You talked about different qualities of food around the world, especially in those blue zones. So we know that we have easy access to processed foods and fast foods here. And a lot of people, that's kind of all they know. And in a lot of communities, especially lower income, that's what they can afford. So how can people start to transition from fast food, processed foods, and start making a change to a little bit healthier quality of food?
That's a super interesting and complicated question, because in an ideal world, I would say, you should learn to cook, and and source everything organically and at the farmer's market, and and have a wide variety of all the good stuff. In daily life, you've got maybe a family, you have work commitments, you have limited resources, and certainly limited time. How do you do all that? Part of it, I think, is planning ahead and strategizing. And so one of the things that we're working on here at Inara Health is putting together these virtual grocery tours, and not just any old grocery store. We're putting together, for instance, five foods under $4 at 7-Eleven. And so what could you do if you're in a pinch, and in your 7-Eleven or a convenience store? What is actually a good grab and go or a better option? Because I think if we are going to try to solve for perfection, that might be the enemy of good enough. So so we're trying to meet people where they are. Figure out some low-hanging fruit where we can make progress, and move forward from there. So I guess that's my first, piece of advice, is that it's not necessary to be perfect. Just pick one goal, and work from that. Sometimes it can be, breakfast can be maybe the simplest, place to begin, and to try to make some helpful changes there. Cooking, and meal planning perhaps on a Sunday, and making some, and incorporating some intentional repetition throughout the week, and maybe, warning your family that you're going to do that, can be another way to get some healthy eating in there. Repurposing foods. So, you might start out with a rotisserie chicken on Sunday, and it becomes chicken fried rice on Monday, and whatever's left over ends up in your lunchbox on Tuesday. Are some good ways to go about that.
I'm so glad that you mentioned meeting someone where they are at, because I'm sure you've seen it before where someone gets this diet plan and it's completely opposite of what they've ever eaten in their entire life, and they're really excited about it, but they can't follow it because it's just so difficult to make that big of a change. So the fact that you're talking about, it doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gate. All you need to do is make a little tiny change, and change the idea around the food that they're choosing from in the same places that they might be going, is going to get them so much further with making those dietary changes.
And that, I think that's probably some of the most important advice, because each one of us is our own toughest critic, and we're very, we tend to be very kind of, self-critical. And I think most people I know and me tend to fall into that category. And so you can end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater when these small changes were actually making big differences. And so I'd like to look at, not only the physical activity and the need I mentioned, but also food and nutrition in that same way. And maybe over time it starts to become more fun. It starts to become more interesting. The more you think about it, you may come up with your own, food hacks that are going to work super great for you. I have one where I, tend to, make a quiche, but without I'm too lazy to try to make a pie crust or even to know which one I should be buying, but I will, make some type of like a frittata type thing, but I'll put it into muffin cups and then I'll freeze those. So I can just pop those out and eat them throughout the week, grab it to go. There are a bunch of, great options at Trader Joe's that don't involve a lot of meal prep, like those French lentils and a few other, great parts of meals there that you can put together and use throughout the week.
Now, Lydia, is there any other kind of pillars there that I missed? We covered food, we covered movement, sleep, and stress. Was there a fifth one, or was it four?
Yeah, so in obesity medicine, there are four major pillars, and I would say and then kind of like a fifth offshoot. And so when we treat a patient comes to see me, for instance, as the obesity specialist, I very much do think of physical activity in all those five components that I mentioned. I think about nutrition, and not just in terms of the macronutrients, the ones that we all know, the protein, fat, and carbohydrates, but I think of the quality of the food that's eaten, and try to understand and again meet the patient where they are, because ultra processed foods do cause metabolic imbalance, and then the third one would be behavioral modification. And that kind of, when you're changing nutrition and physical activity, in a sense, you are already engaging in behavioral modification. So that, that's definitely a component there. And behavioral modification is almost in some ways an umbrella around sleep, around stress, around all of these different factors. And so that's the third pillar. And then the fourth one is actually medication management. And so there are, we call them AOMs in our lingo, but anti-obesity medications, and then also weight gain medications. So, there's a lot of, there are a lot of blood pressure issues out there, cholesterol, depression, and so forth. And many of these medications are also associated with weight gain. Some sleep medications can also be associated with weight gain. And it's not something that is, always that obvious to a non-physician, and especially a non-obesity specialist. This is some of the stuff we think about all the time. And so we'll discuss medication management and anti-obesity medications. And then the fifth kind of offshoot, which is, is surgical. And so while this isn't something as an internist I would do, but it is kind of in my toolbox that I'm thinking, when might this be an appropriate referral for my patient?
Perfect. Well, is there any final things that you want to touch on with obesity medicine before we wrap up here?
Let's see. Well, I would say that it is, if you're, considering, a career in medicine, whether as a physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, a registered dietitian or any of that, consider this field. It's an absolutely amazing place where we reverse diabetes, we reverse hypertension, and I liken it to being sort of the labor and delivery of adult medicine. And I feel really fortunate to be working with the Obesity Medicine Association on a national scale to to be able to educate and mentor to mentor others, and then also teach my patients about this kind of healthy living. Because I always say, when we treat the roots, which are obesity, then that's a better place to be than treating the fruits. So we're not playing whack-a-mole with blood pressure and with blood sugar. If we're treating and sleep apnea and all the different joint issues, when we treat toward a healthier weight, the improvements we see are all across the spectrum, and that's super exciting.
And the transformations that happen both for the patient and the clinician is just absolutely amazing to see that transformation happen as well.
It is. It's like the labor and delivery of adult medicine.
Yep,
I feel
exactly.
is what the specialty that I'm in.
Well, my final question for you is, what do you do each day to improve your own health?
Well, I do have my NEAT that I'm always trying to get in, my treadmill desk, and so forth. Other things I try to do is spend time with my community, and so that's my family, my friends, and try to reach out to people that way. One of I think the areas that might be underappreciated in a lot of this work toward health, but was seen in the blue zones again, is that these friendships, these connections within communities, and this feeling of having a purpose there, that you're giving to others, and then also receiving from others, I think is really important in terms of our mental health. So on a daily basis, I think about that, and I think about what I can do for others, and how I fit into a community, which is great for mental health.
Well, people can find more about the work that you do at obesitymedicine.org. You also have the new startup that you're at. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I'd love to. So in a true Silicon Valley, approach to all things, it would seem, I joined a medtech startup a couple of months ago called the Nara Health, and as their chief medical officer and medical director, which has been really, really exciting because we, for what we discussed just now, Brian, we take that that 4-pillar approach to managing patients, and we do it in a way that we are available, with a very multidisciplinary approach to patient care. So there's the physician that you get. There's also a group of registered dietitians. We just brought on physical therapy, which I think is an important part, of helping people have pain-free movement, especially when our patients with obesity. We have a behavioral therapist who's on board too, and so there's all of this working together. We have an exercise physiologist as well, who works on strength training, focuses on sarcopenia and reversing that in some of our older adults. So I feel super excited to be helping develop an application or an app that is full service like that for our patients. And so there's an asynchronous and then a synchronous, physician appointment and RD appointment and all that portion of it as well.
Well, it sounds like you're doing amazing work, and I know you are over with the obesity medicine stuff, and that app sounds really cool. Is that currently live, or is it still in beta?
No, it is. It's live. It's Nara Health, and it's a membership. It's a membership medical group where we give this multidisciplinary, very intensive behavioral therapy approach to managing our patients. We're in 3 different states now: Illinois, Texas, and of course California, and it's growing quickly, and it's super exciting. Our patients will see a registered dietitian every single week, then an exercise physiologist and their physician, and I feel in many ways that we sort of crack the code for not only weight loss but weight maintenance, because one of the biggest areas here is many people can lose weight, but you're dealing with physiology and metabolic dysregulation and imbalance, and so the name of the game is weight loss and then maintenance. And so our patients maintain the results for years and years, and that is really great for me to see that we're reversing. We're reversing their chronic conditions that they've had, and keeping them healthy for many years at a time.
Well, Lydia, you're doing great stuff, and we need a lot more people like you. So it's awesome that you're also training other practitioners to do this type of stuff as well. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all this.
It's been my absolute pleasure.
I hope you are able to take these pillars of weight loss and apply it to yourself if you are trying to lose weight. And people working in obesity medicine clinics see some phenomenal transformations occur with the patients and clients they work with. And they've learned a lot about different triggers that can stimulate weight gain. And remember, you can always go back and re-listen to this episode to hear the information again if you didn't get it the first time. Next week, Cynthia Kane will be joining me, so let's go learn who she is. I am here with Cynthia Kane. Hey, Cynthia, what is one unique thing about you that most people don't know?
Most people don't know that I lived in Madrid for about 7 years, and I wrote a hiking guidebook while I lived out there.
Oh, wow. What's your favorite hike?
My favorite hike is in Manzanares. It's just one of the hikes that's in the park there. The area is just phenomenal. And we started a guiding company too. So if you go to Madrid, you can check out Hiking in the Community of Madrid, and they still go out every weekend. It's like a little intercambio. It's awesome.
That's amazing. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Well, what will we be learning about in our interview together?
Well, we'll be learning about how to be in difficult interactions and ways that you can navigate those a little more easily. We'll learn about how to allow other people to speak without us interrupting, and learn a little bit about how to, connect with ourselves differently in these moments too.
And what are your favorite foods or nutrients that you think everyone should get more of in their diet?
That's a good question. I think that water, even though you might not consider that a food, I think water is very important. Also, protein, and I also believe tea. More liquid. I'm more of a liquid type of person, I think.
What's your favorite tea?
So I'm really loving this lavender chamomile tea. It's really quite delicious.
And then what are your top 3 health tips for anyone who wants to improve their overall wellness?
Meditation, sleep, and being outside, walking in nature.
Communication is a huge part of everything we do. And I've noticed how hard it is for people to have open conversations with each other.